All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the IDEA Committee meeting of May 18th, 2022. And I think, Ingrid, we agree that you would read the preamble.
This meeting is compliant with the Ralph M. Brown Act as amended by the California Assembly Bill number 361, effective September 16, 2021, providing for a public health emergency exception to the standard teleconference rules required by the Brown Act. The purpose of this is to provide a safe environment for the public, staff, and committee members while allowing for public participation. The public may address the committee members using exclusively remote public comment options. The committee may take action on any item listed in the agenda. To address the committee, the IDEA Committee meeting will be an exclusively virtual meeting. The IDEA Committee meeting agenda materials may be viewed online at brisbaneca.org at least 24 hours prior to a special meeting and at least 72 hours prior to a regular meeting. To view the meeting, please join the meeting with the Zoom information below. Meeting participants are encouraged to submit public comments in writing in advance of the meeting. Aside from the commenting while in the Zoom, the following email and text line will also be monitored during the meeting. And public comments received will be noted into the record during oral communications or an item. Email ipadilla@brisbaneca.org, text 628-219-2922. Join the Zoom meeting with the ID 816-0979-9931 and the passcode 123456. The call-in number is 1-669-900-9128. If you need special assistance to participate in this meeting, please contact me, the city clerk, at 415-508-2113. Notification in advance of this meeting will enable the city to make reasonable arrangements to ensure accessibility to this meeting. Thank you.
All right. So I'm calling this meeting to order at 6:03 p.m. Staff, roll call, please.
Alex Horton. Committee member Mangesh Kolhatkar.
Here.
Committee member Diana Seto.
Aye.
And Chair William Locke.
Aye. All right. Thank you, everyone. First off, can I get a first and a second to approve our agenda as it stands?
I make a motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
Okay. Roll call, please.
Committee member Horton.
Aye.
Committee member Kolhatkar.
Aye.
Committee member Seto.
Aye.
And Chair Locke.
Aye. Thanks, everyone. Then next on the list, on the agenda, I would like to amend the minutes to include the nomination for Alex Horton as vice chair. Can I get a first and a second to approve the minutes of April 20th as amended? If so, can I get a vote? Yeah, a first and a second.
Was that a motion, Alex?
First.
Second?
I'll second it. All right, roll call vote, please.
Committee member Horton.
Aye.
Committee member Kolhatkar.
Aye.
Committee member Seto.
Aye.
And Chair Locke.
Aye. Thanks. Next on the list, can I get a first and a second to approve the minutes of March 23rd, 2022?
First.
I'll second.
Committee member Horton.
Aye.
Committee member Kolhatkar.
Aye.
Committee member Seto.
Aye.
And Chair Locke.
Aye. All right, and then
Sorry, I just noticed through the chair that the date on this agenda was the 23rd, but the meeting was on the 16th.
Oh, 16th. That's correct.
okay, sorry. Do we have to amend?
I'll
this?
I'll add that to the motion.
Okay.
Thank you.
Did you get the
Right.
first and second? Okay.
All right. I'll first.
Okay. Second?
The meeting was on the 20th, Caroline.
April 20th and March 16th.
Oh.
Yeah,
sorry.
March 16th.
The March
Okay,
one.
March 16th.
I'm
Okay.
sorry, I picked the wrong, I was looking at the wrong one.
As
Alright.
of that
I'm sick.
June.
I'll
So
be
the-
quiet now.
Okay, the agenda's wrong. Okay. Got it.
Sorry about the confusion. Okay, we got a motion from Chair Locke with that change, with that additional change. The second will be,
Second.
Roll call.
Second.
I got the second from Committee Member Horton, and I'll do the roll call vote now. Committee Member Horton.
Aye.
Committee Member Kohut-Kar,
Aye.
Committee Member Seto,
Aye.
and Chair Locke.
Aye.
Thank you.
And I think right now we're done with all the approvals, so let's move on to public comments. Any member of the public wishing to make a public comment at this time?
Chair Locke, there are no members of the public in attendance, and I did not receive any written correspondence.
All right, thank you. All right, let's move on to old business then. So discussion of committee responsibilities. That's what we did in the last meeting. We were defining inclusion, diversity, equity, and accountability as a committee. And I believe we have a staff report.
So the purpose of this item is to receive the staff presentation and definitions of inclusion, diversity, equity, and accountability, and discuss next steps. We had such a discussion last meeting, but as you know, back in September, that's when the council approved the citizen committee for the purpose of defining the meaning of diversity and inclusion for the city of Brisbane, and that the primary responsibility for the idea committee will be to make recommendations to the city on the implementation of relevant community-focused programs, events, and policies that support and enhance inclusion, diversity, and equity issues, and accountability for these issues. So we thought that would be the best starting point, just to look at the definitions of the terms. And staff would like to know the committee's definition of these keywords, continue the discussion from the last meeting, and we had a couple of great guiding frameworks and resources based on the recommendations of committee members at the last meeting. And I also forwarded some information, some materials curated by the International City Managers Association for their toolkit that I thought would be also a good resource and context for this discussion. Even though some of the materials in that particular resource is more kind of internally focused, they did have some tools for, how to best serve the community, kind of more community focused definitions. So with that, let me go share the PowerPoint here. Sorry, let's see. So with this, staff would like to know from committee members your definition of inclusion, diversity, equity, and accountability. The first one that committee member Seto forwarded to us was from the city of Sacramento. Their definition of diversity was taken from the Global Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Benchmark Model, which is a really good resource. Basically, the center's mission is to serve as a resource for research and education for individuals and organizations in their quest to improve diversity and inclusion practices around the world. So this is from the Center for Global Inclusion. So their definition, or the one that City of Sacramento chose to use, would be that each person has layers of diversity that makes his, her, their perspective unique. The city defines diversity as the variety of human differences and similarities among people, such as age, belief system, class, caste, culture, disability, education, ethnicity, gender identity, generation, geography, job role and function, language, marital status, mental health, nationality, native or indigenous origins, parental status, personality type, race, religion, sexual orientation, thinking style, work experience, and work style. With that, the city of Sacramento also defined inclusion. And again, this is adopted from the Global Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Benchmark Model. Inclusion. This is an active state of being valued, respected, and supported. Inclusion focuses on the needs of every individual and ensures the right conditions are in place for each person to achieve his or her full potential. Inclusion should be reflected in an organization's culture, practices, and relationships which are in place to support a diverse workforce. The city's definition of inclusion draws from the Global Diversity and Inclusion Benchmark Model, which defines the word as a dynamic state of operating in which diversity is leveraged to create a fair, healthy, and high-performing organization and/or community. Inclusive environment ensures equitable access to resources and opportunities for all. It also enables individuals and groups to feel safe, respected, engaged, motivated, and valued for who they are and for their contributions towards organizational and societal goals. Next would be their definition of equity. The city's definition of racial equity is adapted from the Government Alliance on Race and Equity's definition. Regardless of one's identity, equity is when all people have just treatment, access to opportunities necessary to satisfy their essential needs, advance their well-being, and achieve their full potential while identifying and eliminating barriers that have prevented the full participation of some groups. So the Government Alliance on Race and Equity is a national network of government working to achieve racial equity and advancing opportunities for all. And this definition was adapted from them. So next, this was also part of the Global Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Benchmark Model, and it was not discussed by in the city of Sacramento's website, but I thought this was kind of the most closely related to defining accountability. And in that model, integrity is defined as the quality of being honest and having strong ethical principles. And responsibility is the state of being accountable for something within one's power, control, or management. It is a duty or obligation to satisfactorily complete an action or carry out a promise. And so with this model, all individuals and organizations must be concerned with integrity, truth, and honesty, as well as equity, fairness, and responsibility. So people are treated honestly, equitably, and responsibly, and organizations treat all their stakeholders with integrity, fairness, and responsibility. We see these values as foundational and as the ethical case for diversity, equity, and inclusion. This was also forwarded by committee member Colette Carr, and this was a definition from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Diversity is a broad array of differences in identity, perspective, skill, and style. Equity, practices and policies that are just, transparent, and consistent. Inclusion, an environment that actively welcomes, connects, and values all while harming none. Lastly, this was taken from the International City County Management Association. So this is an organization of local government professionals dedicated to creating and sustaining thriving communities throughout the world. And this is also another good organization that has been working on diversity, equity, and inclusion within local government. And so their diversity within their toolkit describes diversity as, or defines diversity as psychological, physical, and social differences that occur among any and all individuals, such as race, ethnicity, nationality, religion, economic class, age, gender, sexual orientation, mental and physical ability, and learning styles. A diverse group, community, or organization is one in which a variety of social and cultural characteristics exist. And for them, fairness and justice, especially pertaining to rights and protection under the law, is the definition for equity. And the definition for inclusion, the act of creating environments in which any individual or group can feel welcomed, respected, and fully participate. An inclusive and welcoming climate embraces differences and offers respect in words and actions for all people. And I thought all the three of those kind of gave a very good broad perspective on these terms. Thank you for committee member Seton Kohikar for also kickstarting that conversation at the last meeting. There's more.
So
but we
Ingrid,
have-
what here, are we trying to converge on one definition for each of these three attributes?
Yeah, we can go ahead and kickstart that discussion if it's the pleasure of the committee.
Works for me. Do we have to take a roll call on this, or
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
do we have to take a roll call on this, or can we just?
No, I think there has to be a discussion because there's three different, there's, three different sources here, and I don't
Mhm.
know which direction or which kind of spoke more to committee members.
Maybe it might make some sense to talk about diversity first, like what were the words in the diversity group that people jumped out at for them, and then going through equity and then inclusion.
All right. I like this. Was it Sacramento's definition of diversity a lot more than the Belinda Gates one? I thought it was a lot more inclusive of different attributes that we would consider, especially given that the Belinda Gates definition was a little broad. I think we can do a little better than just having a broad interpretation of things. It would be good to kind of have a list of things that we should be considering. That's my opinion. Does anyone else feel strongly one way or another about whether like a more inclusive list would be more beneficial or not?
Yeah, I think I like that perspective. I like how robust the first one is, and also to your point, it can be a good source of accountability for us as we're thinking of, like, when we were thinking of anything really, of saying, like, all right, are we considering all these different components? I also think, I guess, if it's good for the city of Sacramento, it's good for us.
I mean, some difference, I think is this one is kind of, the audience is targeted for a government or community, and versus the other one is a little bit smaller organization, private organization. But the Gates one is kind of easier to understand for everyone, and I'm sure these things talk about the same thing, but how we wording is, I don't know, this may have more information.
So, yeah, I tend to think along the same lines. The City of Sacramento definition and the definition on the from the city governments as well. These are fairly exhaustive, detailed, and lengthy, and they cover everything, but basically enumerate each of the groups. We could, of course, have that in place. In addition, perhaps just have, for conversational purposes and for readability, for quick comprehension, and for easy access and for recall, the definitions as laid out by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation are pithy, concise, and essentially they do encompass everything that is defined by the City of Sacramento as well as by the third entity. I guess it was the City Government Council. We could have a definition and also maybe a byline that says, okay, this is what it is, the essence of it, because essentially this definition that on the slide that you currently have up from the foundation, the Gates Foundation is especially if we're going to publish it out there, and there's a new concept, so there'll be, if it's going to be on the website, if readers are going to come in, at a glance, they quickly comprehend what it's all about, because they've probably heard the term. Some of them may not have heard the terms, but just within like 10 to 15 words, they quickly get to know, okay, this is what it's all about, rather than having to, read through 7 or 8 lines with, about 30, 40 words. That's my input.
Ingrid, can I ask, just for, I guess, clarification, are the definitions, is the purpose to guide the work of this committee, or is it to, as we're like going out into the community, to share? Because I appreciate that point a lot. I think, for us, it might be important to have a more expansive list, but if we are, using these as like taglines, or trying to like engage the community, a paragraph might actually have the opposite effect.
Right, it's definitely both. It's to help guide the work, and also to help guide the conversations for future programs and activities. And I believe for us to be able to, incorporate this into the work, Stuart, let me know if I'm incorrect here, but I think we have to bring this also up to subcommittee or liaisons with our council members.
I think when you develop a work plan and what you want to do, bringing that to the subcommittee is what you want to do, and then bring it to council after that. So having the definitions, I think, will be part of that overall work plan. So yes.
So what I'm hearing is people like the combination of both the Gates and the Sacramento definitions.
Well, I think we could start with the Gates definition and then go on and expand by explaining what exactly identity, perspective, skill, and style means.
Right, like that would be the first sentence.
Exactly.
And then the next.
Yeah, because then I think from my personal line of work, I can pick out a million different things on what could be skill, what can't be skill. But it's kind of nice to say that work experience, work style, thinking style from the city of Sacramento. I like being able to pinpoint to say that that's part of what makes us diverse, as opposed to skill. I mean, that is such a simple word. And at times we do like simplicity, but being able to kind of guide what we do, I think simplicity might end up backfiring. We might overlook a lot of things with just such a simple thing as identity, perspective, skill, and style.
What you might want to do is have a definition that you have out in the public, but then you would define what those individual, because you're right, how somebody identifies identity for one person will be different from somebody else. Mm-hmm. So what you might want to do is say, if the overall categories are correct in diversity,
Right.
And that might be what you put out there, but for internal use, you would say, okay, here's what we define identity as, here's what we define perspective as, here's what we define skill as, and here's
Yeah.
what we define style. And if there's another word that is missing in there, you would add that, you would add the
Mhm.
word in the big context, but then define it for, so that way council and the public has a better understanding, but they could read the brief overall. There
Yeah, I
might be
think
a
that,
way to combine the both ideas.
I think that was what Vice Chair Horton was wondering if we could do. And I'm okay with that, having a more expansive list for internal use, but well understanding that such a list as Council Member Olkar said that it would be a little too much for the public. But for internal use, I'm okay with doing what the city of Sacramento did.
Yeah, and maybe we can go through the city of Sacramento's definition and like map each one to their identity, perspective, skill, and style to see if there are any that like of this Gates definition that feels like it's missing. If folks wanted to be really clear, although it feels like that's pretty encompassing, but if folks had
Let me stop sharing this as a slideshow then, and I could just write directly into the slide. Okay, let's see. Let's see if I can share this now. All right, I can write directly into these slides now.
Okay, so age would be identity, belief system would be perspective, class and caste and culture. Just, I don't know. What I think those also feel like.
That's identity, I would think.
Yeah.
Like belief system, I believe could be perspective as well.
Mhm. I think culture might be a combination of identity and perspective, but probably doesn't need like a new title.
I mean, it can definitely overlap.
Yeah.
Overlap, so would you like to put it in both?
Well,
I don't know that we need to necessarily like,
do any of this right now.
or like map them out in the way that we're changing them, but just make sure that there isn't anything that's glaringly like, oh, that doesn't align with any of these, but it feels
Yeah.
important. We probably need a new.
Like an additional word in
Yeah.
addition to identity, perspective, skill, and style. So I think, Ingrid, what we should be doing is instead of putting it into one of the 4 categories of diversity, we should just go through each one from the state of Sacramento and see if anything doesn't fit in at least one. Maybe that would help us come up with an additional word on top of identity, perspective, skill, and style.
So we're now here in disability.
Definitely.
That would be identity.
Yeah.
Disability, education, ethnicity, gender, gender identity are all identity.
Generation, that could be identity, perspective as well. Geography, identity, perspective. So my big question is style. That is such a vague word. I think we're gonna have to see if anything actually fits in the
Style.
that.
Oh,
Yeah.
this style, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Mm.
So
The ICMA toolkit or
Did we
I
do
think had learning style as a specification.
Mm-hmm.
their thinking style?
Oh yeah, they have thinking style on there.
mhm. Okay.
Personality type could probably be style too.
Okay. Work experience, work style.
Yeah, work
Okay.
style.
Okay,
I
that
feel
all.
it's kind of cheating when you add a word before the word style. Just fit it in. But yeah, I see what they're doing.
I think that all fits.
Yeah, I
That all-
think
Work style. It all fits.
mhm.
Cool.
Yeah, so I agree with what Alex was saying before, saying that the 4 definitely is a
Sorry, I don't have any information about that,
sorry
but I
that
found something similar. Do you want to know what does Alex say?
technology, right? Oh my gosh, okay.
I didn't understand, but I
So Alexis is helping us.
We do have somebody in the public.
Supposed to be a new committee member.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm okay with using the Bill and Melinda Gates broad definition as kind of a guiding point, and then what City of Sacramento did to kind of expand on what they meant by the 4 words that the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is.
Okay.
My last question is, if we are using the exact wording and then and publishing it and then using it, I think we have a fair use and then not infringing anything, but just wanted to get a guidance on legality of using like this phrase or wording or
Yeah, do we have?
making a reference.
Using anything from government wouldn't have that because everything's in the public record and public domain from government. I don't know about Bill and Melinda Gates's foundation, but if we want to, we could send them an email and check if they would be okay with us doing something. Or talk to our attorneys about what we would need to do.
I think it's within the spirit of what Bill and Melinda Gates wants, but
I would think so. We could check with the attorneys
yeah.
on that.
So
But anything that's from another government, those are all in public domain.
Oh, okay.
So just a couple of data points there. So Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is surely classified as a philanthropic, one of those 503c organizations, and not necessarily a private enterprise or entity. And secondly, they have not copyrighted any of the content on their web page here, and I think they have sourced it themselves from public domain. But then again, it doesn't hurt to run it by legal to make sure that since these are quick, easy to understand and relatable definitions. If we just to make sure that we don't have any issue if we use these as is. In our case, given that this committee, we're trying to do 2 things. On the one hand, like the City of Sacramento has done, we want to have an exhaustive list so that it clearly defines the scope of our work. In addition, this is a new committee, and we would like the residents to engage and to understand what these definitions are, and to invest as little time as possible, but at the same time, enrich their own understanding and have a good comprehension and quick and easy comprehension of these attributes. So that's why doing both, I think, is going to help both from a council perspective and from the city perspective in having an exhaustive definition, but from the readership standpoint, for the audience intended, I think the definitions here from the foundation would certainly be helpful.
Great. Would the committee like to work on equity next?
Do it.
Um,
Or inclusion.
Where's equity now? Here is, oh, I'm sorry, inclusion. I can take inclusion, an environment that actively welcomes, connects, and values all while harming none. Again, with their keywords, huh? Welcomes, connects, and values.
Well, for the city of Sacramento, if we delete that sentence that starts with the city definition of inclusion draws from the global idea benchmark, the length isn't too far off. And again, I do like the city of Sacramento is a little more, just because it's a little more in depth. Because then welcomes, connects, values. That's 3 words that are very vague again. And I could see the city of Sacramento using the same, like I could value isn't saying respected. That could be welcome, support that could fall under welcome as well. So a lot of similarities in both, just depending on how you want to go about explaining exactly what we think inclusion means.
Yeah, I think my one question about the Sacramento definition is the end of the sentence before, which are in place to support a diverse workforce. I don't know that would apply to us as so much as like to support a diverse community or city.
Community, I think, is better.
Communities, culture up above. Instead of organizations. Culture.
Yep.
What's that, Caroline?
The line above right there, change to communities instead of organization.
Communities reflected in a community's culture.
Mhm.
In a community's.
Yeah, we could delete that last sentence because that's a goal. That's not
Alright,
really,
delete this.
yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, I like that second paragraph because that's what we're trying to do as city council, city government, and within an arm of Brisbane.
The 60 are the benchmark identified exact sentence. That's from the benchmark. The organization drafted this like 100-page document.
And did you How about, was that an edit or?
I think that the second paragraph is, as mentioned, adapted, used the exact wording from the
benchmark model?
benchmark model.
Okay.
I don't know. This is like non-profit organization who are doing some research on these things.
Okay, so we have these two paragraphs as the official.
Can we add the part where it says while harming none from the Bill and Melinda Gates?
While harming none. Where exactly in the first, after the first?
I feel like after full potential.
And then use our sort of abridged or adapted Sacramento rather than the Bill and Melinda Gates for this one, or do both still again?
Let's take this out.
I like the longer version because it's short enough as an inclusion.
Mhm.
This doesn't use it. It's not listing a bunch of stuff, kind of like the diversity definition. It's telling more of a story of what we want to do. So I think, in my opinion, this works a lot better than diversity's definition.
Does that look correct?
Yeah, you can just take the last sentence, the parentheses out, because that's no longer true. We're doing a little bit of both.
Adopted from many models.
Mhm.
My only question, and I'm sorry if I'm wordsmithing too much here, but is there a different word instead of using community twice, and inclusion should be reflected in a community's culture, practices, and relationships which are in place to support a diverse community? Like, should one of those be a different word? But I can't think of which one it should be.
Maybe the first one can just be our. OUR.
In our culture, practices, and relationships. Yeah, I like that.
That's, yeah. I'm okay with that too. So take out A before.
Like that.
I like it.
Oh, wait, and then let's just say the last sentence, valued for who they are and for their contributions toward societal goals. I don't think we need organizational in there either, right?
Mm.
Thoughts on the pronouns in the second sentence in the first paragraph? For each person to achieve his or her full potential.
Her or they or their. His, her, their.
Mhm.
Or just like replace his or her with their. That could be another option. What
I
is
think
it?
just saying there would suffice.
Mhm.
Right,
Yeah, I agree.
getting more concise.
Great. And then equity, should we move on to that?
Sure.
I actually think that the Sacramento one, yeah, if we got rid of that first sentence in theirs, it feels concise enough. And like it still carries the spirit of the Gates.
Uh, let's add the word consistent somewhere, or just make that part clear. Because I think that's a big part of equity, being consistent all around the board.
Just and consistent. And then put a colon, something like that. Because what you want is just and consistent treatment, access to opportunities. The just isn't just treatment, it's just access, you know.
Well, I mean, we could go a step further and just write just, transparent, and consistent. Best of both worlds.
And then maybe what you do is you bullet point the other ones as opposed to putting them in that.
Weird.
You bullet point them so they fall underneath.
Kind of like A, treatment, B, access to opportunities, C, evidence.
Right.
No, before consistent.
Or after consistent, you put the
Yeah,
colon
after
consistent, and then you bullet point everything underneath that. I think that gets to what you're talking about, William.
Yes.
Just and consistent treatment, access to opportunities. Is this advancement?
I would say to advance their well-being and achieve their full potential. And then I would do a new sentence and saying identify and eliminate barriers that have prevented.
Yeah.
So get rid of the while, and then I would just make that a brand new sentence at the bottom.
Identify and eliminate.
Identify and eliminate barriers. Yeah, that's what I would do, but I'm not the committee. I'm sorry.
Regardless of one's just transparent and consistent treatment, access to opportunities.
I would change the sum to all. Only because you could sit there and say we're, flip it of some groups, it doesn't mean that you're willing to do it for all groups. I love wordsmithing.
I don't like this thing too here.
Yeah.
Consistent. Have just transparent, consistent treatment.
You could say advancement of one's well-being to achieve.
Advancement to. Was that?
And achievement.
Or just make achievement another bullet point underneath achievement of their full potential.
Would it be advancement of their well-being?
And I think it also might need to be access to advancement of their well-being, right? Because if you read, regardless of one's identity, equity is when all people have just, transparent, and consistent advancement of their well-being. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense to have just, transparent, consistent advancement.
We could say the same thing for achievement too.
Access to.
And then I guess while we're on the topic, treatment by whom?
By all.
Treatment by all? Mhm.
Community at large.
And by all, I feel like would be more encompassing.
Mhm.
This might be nitpicky, but I use 2 commas when there's 3 words in the sentence that you want to separate. So yeah, after translation.
Oxford comma.
Yep.
MLA style guide.
Mhm.
Can I suggest? I'm struggling with like using access 3 times.
Mhm.
And I'm thinking one of them could be ability, like ability to achieve their full potential. People have just, transparent, and consistent ability to achieve their full potential.
Or opportunities.
Opportunity, I think
I
opportunity. would be a
prefer
good word there.
opportunity because ability,
Right, no, opportunity would be great.
yeah.
So I'm sorry, what is that?
Opportunity to achieve their full potential instead of achieving it.
See, now we get to the point where we could also say opportunity to advance their well-being. I mean, now we're just kind of
Mm.
adding more to it.
And there's access to opportunities. Yeah.
So we're back to the same thing where we're
Yeah.
using access to opportunities 3 times again.
And I guess that's the thing is like opportunity. I mean, I think that's the question is what are we trying to? It's an interesting philosophical question. Are we trying to give people the opportunity to achieve things, or are we trying to get to the end result?
I don't think we can promise the end result. It'd be foolish to do that.
I think equity, that's a really good question. And I think equity is the opportunity to try to do it, right? So like we can't, at some point, you can't promise that if I give you a chance, you'll be able to do it. But the purpose of equity is to ensure that you have a chance and that chance is equal. There are no barriers, additional barriers that you're experiencing as you like explore that chance. Or that's how I think of it, I think.
Now that I think about it more and more, I actually don't like any of this. Because then like full potential, what does that mean? Well-being, essential needs.
Mhm.
We're getting into the nitty-gritty of kind of defining what essential needs means. What you consider essential might not be what I consider essential. So I think in this case, I don't know, should we just go a little more broad?
The third definition was
Yeah.
fairness and justice, especially pertaining to rights and protection under the law.
It's a lot simpler because I mean, at a point we're not making any crazy promises.
Well, because this one too for Melinda, it focuses on the practices and the policies.
Yeah.
This one, whereas this one is the effect.
Yeah. So yeah, now that I think about it, I don't like the City of Sacramento's definition at all.
I do think that the identify and eliminate barriers is an important part though.
Okay.
So I think like either the Bill and Melinda Gates or the third one, and then adding, in addition, identifying and eliminating barriers that have prevented the full participation of all groups, or, you know, have like prohibited these things from successfully happening previously.
Because right now, the city of Sacramento, they're saying just treatment, access to opportunities necessary to satisfy their essential needs, advance their well-being, and achieve their full potential. I mean, that's a very bold statement. And we can spend all night talking about every little bits of it. Yeah. I agree with Alex that the participation part, I think that's really important.
So which
Uh,
is the preference? The first one for from the Gates Foundation, or the second one from the GEAR group?
I know for sure we should probably scrap that middle part that starts with regardless, just as a whole.
I think for the purposes of our committee, the Gates resonates more with me when I think about, ideally this committee will be involved in like policy recommendation or review, but also the practices feels more to me like if we're doing community events, and the like very explicit call out around like under the law with the third one feels to both like limit the scope of our work and potentially like imply greater responsibility or authority than we actually have.
Mm-hmm.
So should we go equity is, or equity is a set of practices and policies, system?
Like just equity means practices and policies. Are you looking for that word in between?
Mhm.
Does this also encapsulate for you the, like if people are filling out a form for assistance, whether it be from the city or from PG&E for rate assistance, like is that considered part of practices and policies? It's just something I was listening to recently where people were required to fill out the form for CalFresh or something to get assistance with groceries. And it was like, if they skipped the question, then it would prevent them from getting access to the ability to buy what they really needed for their family. So,
But I can argue that it's, if they're doing it consistently, that's okay.
that covers it.
Yeah, I think. Isn't it, if one question disqualifies you, and every person who doesn't answer it gets disqualified, it's still consistent. We're being equal. It might not be fair, which is, I think, another philosophical question that we could really dive into. But I think the purpose of the idea committee is we can't be fair to everyone, but we can be consistent, or we can at least try to be, in a matter of implementing policies and practices. And I think that's all we can really hope for at this point. Because we can't give everyone what they want. That's I think that's a given from the start. No, not everyone's going to be happy. But as long as we're consistently doing what we say we are, I think that's a good start.
And I guess, Caroline, to that specific point too, I wonder if the like inclusion of transparent in the definition means that like you need, when folks are completing the CalFresh application, like they need to have access in the language that they speak. They need to understand what happens if they don't fill out all of the questions. And like, that's, for me, that's where the transparency comes in.
Mhm.
Mhm. Yeah.
Good.
I think we also need like, it also means to identify and eliminate barriers or something.
I'm okay with this definition right now.
Strike that first, that under after policies.
Mm-hmm. That should, do we need to elaborate to say it also means to identify and eliminate barriers in those practices and policies that have prevented the full participation of all groups, or is it clear what that is in the second sentence?
Well, specifically, equity implies that you're challenging and responding to barriers that traditionally, such as bias, harassment, discrimination. So that essentially, if you're as a practice, if you challenge and respond to these, predominant barriers, those of bias, harassment, and discrimination, you're facilitating equal opportunity for all and equity for all.
I think a lot of that gets covered in consistent.
Okay.
Because if we're consistent, we're not biased.
But Alex was asking if we should add, it also means identify and eliminate barriers to practices and policies.
Mhm.
Would you want to include that, or is that?
Mm.
Maybe like eliminate barriers in any practices and policies, so it's not implying that there necessarily are, but that they'll be identified.
Or we could, instead of that have prevented, we could just say preventing.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Fantastic. Okay. Any other edits or suggestions?
I'm pretty satisfied. I think last one's accountability.
That's right. So accountability, I did not find much around accountability.
Sorry, I'm so sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
For equity, does it make more sense to say it also means the identification and elimination of barriers preventing the full participation of all groups?
Wait, I lost the
Elimination
elimination.
of barriers.
I think Alex said all barriers.
Oh, all barriers.
I think that's what she said.
I think that's what we had before. Yeah.
In terms of the accountability, the closest thing I found was around thoughts around integrity and responsibility. And how those two kind of play as the values and the foundational and ethical case for the work.
I think the second question is using the word accountable, so that doesn't really help us.
Yeah. Unless you just switch accountability, accountable and responsibility,
Accountability is instead of being responsible.
being facetious. I do think, though, the duty or obligation to satisfactorily complete an action or carry out a promise could apply.
Yeah, yeah. I'm okay with switching responsibility and accountable, those two words around. I think that would at least get us a starting point.
They are synonyms, apparently. What if we said the state of being responsible and answerable to? Because I think that the other piece of accountability is like you're in charge, but you're also like being held to it.
That feels like it's putting a sort of penalty. I don't think we can really be held accountable in that sense. Because then what would that mean? Like, we lose our position, we go to jail, we get fined, we are not up for re-election.
I don't think it's accountability for the committee. I think it's like, what does accountability mean? For
Well,
the
I think this,
being in implementing.
yeah, I think at the end of the day, it's accountability for city council. Because they're the ones implementing the policies. And they do have a lot of
Well,
potential.
Ingrid and Caroline, what did you all mean when you use this word? Because it is a sort of a word that you don't often see in the like DE&I acronyms.
I think it's to try and get to the perspective that not only are we striving for it, but what are the results? I think
Yeah,
that,
it's kind of more data driven.
So like measurements.
right. I think that's when that end idea sounded a lot better than I'd.
Yeah. I mean, the government loves spelling words out.
Make it easy for people, you know?
Yeah.
But I think when, you know, it was something that Ingrid, Caroline and myself were talking about. I think it really was that idea that it's nice to have policies, but what are the results of those policies becomes important as well. And then how does the public hold the city accountable for what's happening? And, you know, what would, you know, so as you said, Alex, what's the measurements that we would be doing? How would we report back to the public that we, you know, that we're succeeding at what we said we were?
That makes sense, because in for every publicly held position, there's a little bit of accountability built in during re-election, during other measures of removing someone from office. I think that's why we don't really talk about accountability in that sense, but accountability for data measurement and whether we're hitting at certain goals. I mean, that we could focus on that portion more. Because regardless of what we say for accountability, if the government official does something that the public doesn't like, there are ways of removing that person and changing the policies, theoretically at least. So I do like the idea of kind of figuring out benchmarks.
Right. I mean, the challenge is if we don't put out what the results are, then it would be hard pressed to have somebody have that conversation publicly.
Mhm.
That you know, you have all these good policies, but nothing actually happened. And I think it's a combination of accountability and transparency is what we're trying to achieve.
So at the simplest level, what this implies is we define metrics, certain measurements, and we report on a periodic basis, progress updates, and that's it. This accountability is just to define the metrics, to take measurements, and to report on our progress on a, you know, periodically.
And it goes along with what I think what the committee was talking about at the first meeting, where you were asking who actually attends our recreation programs. And, you know, the response is we don't know because we don't track it. But what we have done is with our Parks and Recreation survey, we have put some of that in, we have put some of the demographic questions to get a better sense of who's attending and what, and are we reaching everybody based on what your conversation was. And I think that's part of that accountability. So I would agree with Mangesh on that.
Would you go as far as to like set goals around that? Or is it for now just the act of like defining how we want to measure the success and like to report on it, but not yet to like, until we know?
Oh, you put me in a bind there. And you know, in all government employees, we don't want to be measured for what we do. We just want to say what we're doing. I think my perspective would be is that I think the committee does want to set goals. I don't know if you want to have it in this definition at the moment, but I think as we're going through and, you know, if we're doing a program, I think the committee should say, you know, we want to see, you know, this is our goal. You know, we want to have participation be reflective of our community. Our community is X% Asian, X% white, X% neurodiverse or whatever. And are we reaching all those different people? You know, when we have our utility care program, is our, you know, where we do benefit low, you know, we do offset costs for low income residents. Are we reaching the wide range of low income residents, or are we only reaching a certain part? And I think you as a committee can have those conversations, and then we as staff would come back with different ways that maybe we can achieve better than we're achieving today. You can say, yeah, that seems to work, that would work, and then we can measure it. So I think that's the ultimate goal. I just don't know if you'd want to put it right here, but I think defining metrics, it becomes an important part of what you might want to do as a committee.
So maybe the like progress against those metrics is part of the work plan.
Right, that would make sense.
And it's just like the broader idea.
Right. And I think that's why, you know, when Ingrid, Caroline, and I were talking about, I think that's why the idea of accountability came up and why it seemed important to us to be part of this conversation. And when we raised it with the council understood that as well. But I will say you're spending more time defining what the words mean than the city council subcommittee did. They like the, they like the idea of what we were doing. And that's why, they want to have people in the community really work, spend more time on it.
Is a promise like a unclear term? Should we say carry out objectives by defining metrics take through?
Do we still want the first original part? Or do we just want the second sentence?
I would suggest we just leave it at defining metrics, taking measurements, and reporting on a regular basis, because that is accountable. We are, professing accountability with that sentence, we are. We'll have, of course, define what those metrics need to be, but that's a tactical step that we will do in future meetings.
Right. And you might want to just add as it relates to inclusion, diversity, and equity.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Since
That
you've already defined what those were above.
Right.
Should I put in reporting on a regular basis back to the community? Or
I suggest we just leave it open-ended. And
Yeah.
I think if we can title case diversity, equity, and inclusion. So in other words, D is capitalized, E is capitalized, and so is I. Yeah. Since those are the key dimensions of this committee, dimensions of focus.
And like how
Great.
Manchester mentioned earlier, the words "our progress." So maybe reporting our progress on a regular basis.
Right, progress would be in there too. A good point.
Maybe commas after take measurements and equity.
Can we not use the word "our"? Because then I feel like "our" might be a little limiting to just the committee itself, whereas it's a goal of everyone. I feel like there could be a better word there. Okay. That
That's good. I think that, yeah.
Yeah. Should we do inclusion first? That way kind of spells out ideas.
oh,
Almost. Mhm.
Actually, I think it should be, sorry, not the reordering of it. And I think instead of the, it should be that.
reporting that progress.
Yeah.
Seems like a winner.
I'm okay with this.
I think one question that I have is to look at all of these now, because I realize we said equity means, but accountability is, and so just being consistent in how we're.
Let's put it all in one here.
Let's see this hodgepodge.
You see all that? It's kind of a.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's fine.
So to your point, Alex, if we are to stay consistent in terms of voice, so if you're in third person inclusion, I would suggest we go back to reflected in the community's culture and keep it third person, because again, it suddenly it becomes first person, and we had eliminated first person, in accountability just now. So we have in the last sentence, inclusion should be reflected in our culture. So do we want to have that, our, instead of our, we go back to the community
Or
or some other,
the city of Brisbane's.
yeah. In the cities, yeah. Okay, I think otherwise it looks good from my side.
I think we should make it consistent. So it either is like diversity is a broad array of differences, inclusion is an active state, equity is practices and policies that are, I think, yeah, the equity is like a little bit of a outlier. Or we could just take out the is and do like diversity colon a broad array, inclusion colon an active state, equity colon practices and policies, and accountability colon defining.
I like that. That's good.
So the sentence that starts with an inclusive environment, that sounds a lot like us explaining to everyone else why we're doing it.
Mhm.
I feel like it's not needed.
Mhm.
That's not a definition, that's a goal.
A goal statement.
Yeah. Take that out.
Yep.
And then maybe with equity, we should change it also means to it is also.
So should we say practices and policies that are just, transparent, and consistent?
Mhm. Do we feel like the last sentence in inclusion is also then more of a goal than a
Yeah.
definition?
So let's delete that one. And while we're at it, let's make everything just one sentence. So inclusion in an active state of being valued, respected, and supported that focuses on the needs. And then for the last one, second one. Which
So
also,
So equity could be practices and policies that are just, transparent, and consistent, and that identify and eliminate all barriers, preventing the full participation of all groups.
Or which identify. Oh,
which I prefer which, because we're using that twice.
Oh, yeah, please.
Consistent which identify and eliminate. Should we just say eliminate barriers instead of all?
Because we have all groups.
Yeah, and all barriers. I mean,
Yeah.
that's a
Ahead.
bold statement.
Okay. Oh, and then we need a comma after respected in the first line of inclusion.
In the last sentence of inclusion, or the last part, in place for each person to achieve their full potential, all while harming none.
A full potential comma while harming none,
While harming none, and then the all, right?
right?
Yeah.
Ingrid's got a very hard job here. This is not easy.
Talk about too many cooks in the kitchen.
Is that right? Are in place for each person to achieve their
For full potential, comma, while harming none.
while harming none.
And then just switch diversity inclusion around.
We keep with our acronym.
Dun, 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 dun. Wait, now we need like a. There you go.
Diversity is the simplest.
Mhm.
I don't know why I'm picturing like there should be dance. We could have a dance move, a dance song to this. IDEA, like YMCA.
YMCA.
I'm ready to teach my kids this. Okay. I like the brevity of it and
Mhm.
the definitions.
And then we'll continue, sorry, just for clarity, we'll continue to use that like more expansive diversity definition, like internally among our committee. Is that correct?
Mhm. And I feel like it's a living document anyways.
Mhm.
We can always expand internally on what we mean by all of this.
Sounds good. And I could, should I do the same for some of our notes from the inclusion definition? Those sentences that we deleted.
Mm,
I think the more that we read through those, the more they felt like goals rather than a further.
Mhm.
It's not really definition.
Definition. Then this is the
Yeah, because those are
this
like
one.
the types of characteristics.
Yeah. I could just use the original one for that one, right?
Yeah. You could say like which includes but not limited to.
Mhm.
An asterisk at the end of diversity.
So do we have to cite the, I think Diane brought up earlier about where this came from, like the global
So it's the
diversity.
state of Sacramento, so
Like, do we give them credit for?
well, this is from another government's website, right?
Yep, from the city of Sacramento.
Yeah, and then
Yeah.
they are using a lot wording from the model benchmark model.
I mean,
Right.
if they're citing that, we could just cite them too. That way, it doesn't seem like we're copying another city. We had the same bright idea of looking at the benchmark.
We too will credit.
What's that?
I said we too will credit.
Mhm, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you could
And I'll change this to the original one.
yeah, just change it to the original and then
I can't arrange it in its original form.
okay.
mean, part of the idea of giving, of citing Gar, I don't know how you pronounce it, is to put you in context of of a national idea,
Yeah.
as opposed to this is just a local idea.
Yeah. Gives some credibility to it.
Right.
Um, so we said that we can submit these definitions to the subcommittee liaisons. It sounds like community input is not needed on these definitions.
No, do we have to take a roll call vote to finalize our definitions as it stands within the committee itself?
Yeah, I mean, I think it makes sense to do that. And I think before you go to the committee, you might want to start talking about some of the goals that you have as a committee, what you're trying to, what are we trying to achieve?
Okay, and I think
And that
we
could
could
be our-
table that for next meeting. 'Cause
Right, that could be
it's
your
on the
next meeting.
agenda.
Yeah. Okay, we could take goals. Tips. What are you trying to achieve? All right, for the next meeting. Okay, I could take a first and a second for these definitions. Let me scroll back. Oops, sorry. There you go.
So I'll first it.
I'll second.
Roll call, vote please.
Okay. Committee member Fortune,
Aye.
committee member Kolakar,
Aye.
committee member Osato,
Aye.
and Chair Locke.
Aye.
Motion passes.
And if I could just make a recommendation is maybe at the next meeting, you start with this, because that way you'll have had a month to give it a little bit of thought in case you want to sit on it for a little bit.
Yep.
Okay.
Because I mean, it's always good, like when you're working through it, a lot of ideas come up, and then sitting on it a little bit, you go, ooh, did that really hit the right way that I had thought it was going to for me?
Mhm.
Agreed.
I have a follow-up question about the definitions and if you wanted to see what the community's thoughts were on these at all between now and the next meeting, because we could put these on the idea page and just have like a short
Google
excerpt.
Forms.
Hmm?
Can we do a Google Forms response?
Yeah, we could. We also have the ability to put it on our website, like a form, like
Mhm.
inset
And-
on the website, like the Park and Rec survey,
Okay, yeah, that works.
just to
Yeah.
like get the pulse of, here's what the committee members have defined recently during their meeting. What are your thoughts? And just put it out there to see if anyone has any feedback.
And if anyone who provides feedback, we should say, have you considered applying to be on the committee?
That should be like the automatic reply when they hit submit.
Just the way to get people not to respond to you.
Oh, no.
Although I know like I know a couple of people in the town in the community are interested in joining, aren't they?
Good.
Yes. Until next Friday. Okay, so I'll do that and then you can look at any feedback for next meeting too, as part of this. Start.
Okay, so we'll add that to the task. right. Chair Locke, I also have a slide for the next item
Okay, yeah.
under new business.
I think for new
So-
business creation of
Oh.
subcommittee. Sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
So going back to the previous slide, Ingrid, I think I'm not sure if we can accomplish this, but we also need to define those metrics for accountability and the process for measurement and reporting. So I think that also deserves some discussion.
Mhm.
I'm not sure if we can accomplish this at the next meeting, but if there is
Yeah.
room, time on the agenda, I would suggest we include that as well.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, so yeah, so we're on to new business now, the creation of the subcommittees and possible assignment of committee members within those subcommittees. Ingrid, would you like to share the staff report?
Yeah, I think with this, it's the IT committee will be able to make recommendations to the city council on implementations of relevant community-focused programs, events, and policies. So at the last committee meeting, it was proposed to have subcommittees based on two areas. One being the policy committee, policy subcommittee, and the next one being events. Would these be the two that would make sense to divide up the work?
And we can always create more subcommittees when the new members join, right?
That's correct too.
Yeah, I think we can start off with, I think definitely policy is a very important one. And eventually events would kind of curtail into what we hope to accomplish by reaching out to the community. So I think that's a good start. So given that these two subcommittees, would the committee members like to take some time to think about it, or do you think we should assign members within the subcommittees?
Were we gonna wait until we had new, more people on the committee before assigning members,
think-
or were we gonna go ahead and we will sign up for subcommittees, and then when new folks join, they can also.
Wait, Ingrid, can you remind me of when they would actually start? The new members?
If enough people apply, the committee members will probably start in the fall.
Okay, so I don't think we can wait long enough to have at least a policy subcommittee on this.
Yep.
Because then that would be 3 months from now.
And what we can propose to do is meet as a group first for our next steps. And then the subcommittees can meet after those, metrics and goals and objectives have been defined.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree. I think
Great.
if we don't assign people today, definitely by next meeting, as in June. That way we can kind of get a head start before the new committee members join us.
Mangesh, did you want to add something?
No, I agree. I think we can wait, first have the meeting as you suggested. After we have defined metrics and so on, we can make assignments on the policy subcommittee and the event subcommittee.
Perfect. That's all for me. Thank you.
Okay. I guess. Any announcements from any committee members? Anything else that we should discuss that was on the agenda? If not, I think we
Just
could,
that recruitment is
right,
still going on, and it's due May 25th, next
25th.
Wednesday at 5 p.m.
okay. And then June would be interviews by city council.
Yeah, June and July, if they want to move on with the interviews. If they don't get enough applicants, it might be pushed back
Okay,
till like the fall, because that's when the summer is the recess period for the city council.
oh, okay. So I think realistically, we might be looking at new members in September, October. All right, it seems like we have a lot of work to do with just the four of us until then.
Strong but mighty,
Mhm.
a small but mighty.
Right.
And strong too.
Yes. Well, if no one else has any other announcements or questions or comments, I would like to join the meeting. All right,
Thank you so much. Let me
yeah,
stop
so
the
it's
recording.
7:42.